Hello, everyone. I'm Drew Taylor, film reporter at TheWrap. We are so happy to have you here for our awards screening of Goodnight Oppy with director Ryan White, producer Jessica Hargrave, NASA JPL engineer Doug Ellison, and NASA JPL engineer Bekah Sosland. We're going to be showing you the trailer, and then we'll go right into a conversation with our panelists. To our audience, please participate in the live chat of the stream, share your thoughts about the film, and let us know where you are tuning in from. Now, before we introduce our guests, let's take a look at the trailer.
This is Delta Launch Control.
Go for launch.
3, 2, 1. Engine start and liftoff.
Yeah, it's only a robot, but she becomes a family member.
Our whole objective was to build 2 solar-powered rovers that could survive 3 months on Mars.
And the pressure on the team is really phenomenal. Was Mars once a green world with living things and blue oceans?
This is the very first time we breathe life into the rover.
It's just a box of wires, right? But you end up with this cutish-looking robot that has a face.
Oh, it's alive!
It's time to fly.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are privileged to be in one of the most exciting rooms on Earth at the moment.
Rover diary. The signal from the vehicle is solid and strong. Opportunity is on Mars.
What do we do next?
Let's hit the road, pedal to the metal, and go see Mars. We see these dust devils, and we were concerned that would be the way that she died.
Mars was a spacecraft graveyard when we flew.
I don't think anyone expected the rover to survive all these disasters. You get this feeling of, we're basically invincible. Through this robot, we are on this incredible adventure together.
Humans are capable of forming a connection and a bond to a robot.
She rewrote the history books.
Good night, Opportunity. Well done.
Welcome back. It is my pleasure to introduce Ryan White, Jessica Hargrave, Doug Ellison, and Bekah Sosland. Guys, thank you so much for being here. You know, I feel intimidated talking to filmmakers and producers all day, and now to have a couple of rocket scientists here, it's overwhelming, truly. But for everybody, I wanted to know just how did you first become involved in Goodnight Oppy?
The project first came to me and Ryan a couple of years ago, March 2020. Ryan and I have been best friends since we were little kids in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's always wanted to make a space film because he's always been into space and at some point wanted to be an astronaut, but ended up a filmmaker instead. So we've had a few projects come across our desk that were space themed that didn't really spark for us, but the minute we heard this one, it totally did. It was brought to us by Amblin and Film 45, and they gave us the pitch, the log line, which is amazing. But honestly, this story goes from so much further than just a robot that lived for 15 years, even though it was only expected to live for 90 days.
And Doug and Bekah, how were you approached?
Yeah. Go on, Bekah.
Yeah, so I'll rewind just a bit, but when I was in middle school, actually, I saw Spirit and Opportunity land on Mars, and they were only supposed to last 90 days. So I did not think I would ever have the opportunity to get to work on either one of them. So when I got hired by the Jet Propulsion Lab, which was a dream come true because of Spirit and Opportunity, and then got to be asked if I wanted to work on Opportunity or Curiosity, another rover at the time, I was like dying to work on Opportunity. So that's how I got started on the project. And I always felt very honored to get to work on the project. I also saw a lot of the women in the control room, mission control, when we landed. And so getting to work with them now was like, they were movie stars in my eyes. So that was also really cool. And then I was working on Perseverance. Like, we were in the throes of preparing for launch when I was approached by Film 45 and Tripod Media to be interviewed to see if I wanted to be interviewed for this documentary, which was incredible. So it was really fun because it's fun to tell your story and to have people interested in this side of operations, the side that, you know, the rovers become part of our family. That whole storyline is something that hasn't really been discussed in this capacity before. So it was a lot of fun to do.
And my story is similarly strange in that I was on the outside looking in as well back in 2004. I was considered me the founding member of the Opportunity Fan Club back in 2004. All the pictures they were taking were going straight online, and I couldn't help myself. I was taking those pictures and making panoramas and mosaics and movies and maps and all that kind of stuff. But my day job was multimedia production for a medical training company in England at the time. But through playing with all of this data and kind of engaging with the mission, just they reached out to say, we love what you're doing. Eventually, JPL offered me a job in 2010. I moved over here to Pasadena to work in data visualization, and then moved into mission operations in 2016, first on the Curiosity mission, which I'm still a part of. But once I'd certified to operate cameras on Curiosity, I immediately reached out to Steve Squires, the PI of Spirit and Opportunity, and said, hey, Steve, do you need a camera operator for Opportunity as well? And that's how I ended up going backwards. I did Curiosity, then Opportunity, and now I'm back on Curiosity. And my story is similar to Bekah in terms of, you know, the production reached out, and I never avoid an opportunity to talk about our rover. It was a lot of fun to remember those stories, and also to work with ILM to show them where all the skeletons are buried in terms of the data that they can use to rebuild our rover and rebuild the landscape she was exploring.
Doug, you perfectly set me up because I want to talk about ILM and the amazing animation in this movie. First, for Ryan and Jessica, just sort of how did you go about kind of tackling this and also working with them? I mean, talk about a company that knows about space. You know, they've got it down. But this is obviously a very different project, and I wanted to know, you know, what it was like approaching them with this project.
Sure. So Amblin was our producers of this. And so Amblin has obviously worked in special effects for decades. And at our very first dinner with them in 2020, where we were discussing this film, we asked them, because Jess and I aren't typically historical doc filmmakers. We don't make retrospective films. Typically what we do is verite filmmaking, where we're following something unfolding in real life as it's happening. And so we said, like, is there a way to take the audience to Mars and be on this journey day by day with these robots instead of just looking back at their lives? And they said, we don't know if that's possible, but you should talk to Industrial Light and Magic. And so we began having these conversations in early 2020 about whether they could build a photoreal, authentic Mars based on all of the hundreds of thousands of photographs that these rovers and the orbiters that are above them had taken. And Industrial Light and Magic had never done it before. They had created Mars, you know, around an actor in a desert, but they had never built it from the ground up. But they said that sounds like a really exciting challenge. And that was the beginning of a couple-year process where we started building those from scratch. So, you know, for a good year, our film was black and white pencil sketches. And Doug, as the consultant with Industrial Light Magic, kind of advised them on the photorealism to make sure that we were getting it right.
Yeah, Doug, can you talk about that? So were you know, feeding them actual kind of schematics of Mars and they were building it perfectly?
We're very lucky in that we have a fleet of Mars orbiters, and one of which, called the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, has this amazing camera called HiRISE that takes kind of Google Earth quality images of Mars and has done so repeatedly. And that data could be turned into a 3D model of the terrain. And so, like in the movie, the opening shot, which ends with Opportunity perched on the rim of Victoria crater. That was one of the very first images that high-rise camera ever took when it got to Mars. At this point, 15 years ago as well, actually. And all of that data. This is the remarkable thing. All of that data is in the public domain. It's part of NASA's founding charter, is to share what it does to the widest extent possible. And so all of that data is in the public domain. But I knew which bits and pieces ILM were going to find useful. Like, you can get lost in the terabytes and terabytes of data that's out there. And I was like, guys, this is the data you need. I know exactly what you're going to be doing with it. I don't have your skills. I don't have your experience, but this is what you're going to need. And so I was showing them how to use those elevation models. And then from the surface, we have the hundreds of thousands of pictures taken by both rovers. We have kind of wider angle black and white images. Then we have the color images from a panoramic camera that generated all the gorgeous kind of postcard views of both landing sites. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know just how well ILM were going to pull it off. But I don't think I'm alone in being one of the people involved in the project who has had dreams during the mission and since of like walking around both landing sites. I've actually had dreams where I'm walking up the Columbia Hills or walking down to see where Opportunity is right now. And because you get to know these landscapes really, really well when you are kind of living them through this robot every day. And it was like they reached into my brain and just pulled out that version of Mars and put it on the big screen. It was amazing.
Right. Well, I was going to ask, Doug and Bekah, was it emotional to kind of see what the rover was going through in a way that you never had before? I mean, it's very emotional as a viewer who does not have, is not a rocket scientist, but I imagine being so close to them and then seeing them on Mars in that way was pretty profound. But please tell me.
Yeah, so Doug mentions this in the movie, but when he was talking about the selfie that Opportunity takes around Sol 500, and he says, the science team let the engineers make our rover come back to life and dance for us again. That was so true back on Sol 500, back in the day when we finally got that selfie down. That feeling that I had looking at the selfie, I got all over again when I was watching this film, because once again, Industrial Light and Magic now made our rover come back to life in a way that I've never seen her move before, which was very emotional. And I also learned, I've seen the documentary a few times now. In between those times, I learned that Mark Mangini, our sound guy, took the sounds from Perseverance. So of all the rovers, Perseverance, which is the latest one who just landed on Mars, she gained ears, a new sense, new human sense. So we can now hear the sounds of Mars, which is just incredible. Mark took the sounds that Perseverance recorded and used those in the film. And so in the opening scene, when you hear Mars in the background, the wind blowing, those are actually, he made them sound incredible, but he took the sounds and so those are real Mars sounds that you're hearing. So not only did Industrial Light and Magic do such an incredible job of making our rovers come back to life, but also just the little things that most people don't know about the sounds of Mars too. I mean, it's just incredible. It's incredible what all these filmmakers did. Anyone who helped make this film, they really did do an incredible job. Doug, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Doug, was it better than your dream, or was it?
It was exactly the same. This is what's weird. It was uncanny. It was exactly the same. And I can close my eyes and walk Spirit's route from where she landed up to the Columbia Hills. I can walk it in my mind. I can walk down the little hill where Opportunity died. I can see it in my mind's eye, and it was just bizarre to see it just pop into real life. And Bekah's point about it one of the science team members, a guy called John Proton, who took actually probably more pictures with Opportunity than anybody else. He was almost in tears the day after we took the selfie. Fortuitously, we had a science team meeting here in Pasadena at the same time the selfie came down, and he was in tears afterwards, like saying, I joined this project after the rovers were built. I've never seen them before. Now I've actually seen Opportunity. Like, he was in tears. And I felt the same way he did looking at the selfie, looking at the movie. It was just so nice to see them brought to life in such a true to life way.
But Doug, you have to be honest. Did you watch it and go, actually, that boulder should have been 4 clicks to the left.
I have the first time I saw it, and I think Abby Freeman, who's also in the movie, she and I watched it together for the first time, and the first time we watched it, we were just too nervous. Like it was, you don't know how you're going to come across, you don't know how your mission's going to come across, and we were too nervous to try and pick holes in it. I would say legitimately the 105-minute running time, there's maybe 4 seconds where I'd go, well, actually, and that's it. That's it.
Wow. Good job.
Doug's
guys.
a stickler. Yeah, Doug's a stickler.
Yeah.
He sent me like pages of notes when we were going through the process of developing the model for the rover itself. You know, we had people taking pictures of the models that exist here on Earth to get the textures right, and I would send them to Doug and say, "How we do this time?" You know, and there was always a wait a minute. And so we worked with Doug to get them refined to be as, you know, the rovers themselves. In addition to Mars, we wanted the rovers to have all the right textures and screws and colors and all of that too. And Doug really helped with that.
Well, Ryan and Jessica, not to put you on the spot, but I know that you had so many amazing interview subjects, too many for the movie, in fact. But I wanted to know sort of what made Bekah and Doug so special, and why they were one of the lucky few in this documentary.
Well, when they just introduced themselves, I think you got a taste of that. They're both outsiders. You know, Bekah was from a small town in Texas, and like she said, in middle school, she watched that news piece, and as Doug said, which was a backstory in our film at one point, but ended up on the cutting room floor just for time. So I love when he talks about it in a Q&A, was like president of the fan club in England. And so we were looking for like a very wide breadth of people of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all geographies, to make sure people understand it isn't just Americans working on this. And it wasn't very important for us. You know, we could have, there are thousands of people who work on these rovers, and all thousands of those people are important. So you could make this film with, you know, a dozen other people, and then a dozen other people, and a dozen other people, and you'd probably have a great film. We were very conscious of making sure young people that were watching this film saw themselves represented in some way. And that was having the most diverse cast possible in all ways, you know? And then it comes down to storytelling as well. And we had done a ton of pre-interviews with people, and people that, you know, anecdotally connected to the robots in some way. So Bekah, for example, when her grandma was going through Alzheimer's, was when Opportunity started to lose her memory. And when people had stories like that we knew would bond our audience with the rover in the same way the engineers and scientists did, that was often too special to turn down.
Can you talk about Ryan and Jessica as filmmakers, and then maybe Doug and Bekah as viewers? Was there anything that surprised you, or maybe the thing that surprised you the most while making or watching Goodnight Oppy?
I don't know if I've said this in front of both of you, Doug and Bekah, yet, but the truth is that one of the biggest surprises to me was that I had this preconceived notion of engineers and scientists as being really super academic, which you are, really smart, you know, but I just didn't know. I wondered if it would be hard to pull the story out, or to find people who could connect the way Ryan's talking about emotionally to this story. And it's you guys specifically, but also your larger team. Everyone that we talked to really conveyed this emotion and had this attachment, and were amazing storytellers. And I think it comes down a lot to who you are as people, but also just how much you care about the mission. And that was a great surprise to us. It's a great logline, it's a great story, but then you have these amazing people who are able to bring it to life in a way that exceeded our expectations. Was really a wonderful surprise. Every single time I would do a pre-interview, I would say, wow, that person was so good, you know, and they really cared about this mission. And it seems that it was, you guys have done a lot of work for NASA, but there is, as you say in the film too, Doug, there's like something about this one that really shines through it with each of you.
There's something about Mars surface operations specifically, rovers generally, but Mars surface ops, and it's a different kind of mission operations to all of the other stuff we do. The Earth orbiting missions, things orbiting Saturn or Jupiter or going to asteroids and stuff like that. They're all incredible, exciting, engaging, amazing missions. But they know where they're going to be 6 weeks, 4 months, 2 years from now, because Isaac Newton is doing the driving for them. Once you're engaging with the terrain on the ground, once you're doing kind of discovery-based exploration, and you are battling to survive what Mars is doing to you in terms of the seasons and in terms of how clean your solar arrays are, it's a very different game. And I think it attracts a very different kind of engineer. And I think that comes across in what we said on camera and what made it into the film.
Yeah, and I'll just add quickly to that what surprised me the most is there's not very many times when two industries that are very different come together to make something so incredible, or just make something in general. And getting to know the editors and the composer and the directors and the producers and all the little and even the person who'd come to my house and give me a COVID test, and all the people that came together with their expertise to make this film become a reality is so much like mission operations. It's so much like operating a vehicle. When Doug and I are in the room, we each have our own expertise that we're writing the commands received, all come together to make a whole plan for the rovers to execute that day. We each have our expertise. We have to communicate with each other to make sure all of those pieces fit in together. That's exactly what it takes to make a film. So I had this realization through this entire experience. When people say, it's not rocket science, and people think it's funny, but I've actually gotten to the point where, like, I really don't like that phrase anymore, because I think it pushes aside so many people that could be doing what we're doing. We are just people. We do work hard we have a passion for space. There are so many people out there that have a passion for space, and we need them in this industry. There are a lot. And so when you say it's not just rocket science, I think it makes kids think that that's not something that they can do, that's too hard and they can't do it. But it really is possible. If you have a dream and you work hard and you want to get there, it's possible, whether that is movie making or editing or operating a rover on Mars. There's just a lot of similarities. And I think hopefully this film will show people that they can do it too if they want to, that we're just people just like them, and yeah, that they can do it too.
Gonna make me cry again, Bekah.
I was going to say that Ryan and Jessica probably feel like sometimes trying to get documentary films off the ground is like putting together a rocket and hoping that it does not, nothing goes wrong. I wanted to ask everybody about, obviously the movie is out there, and Ryan, I know that you and Jessica have been showing it everywhere, and I wanted to know about the response to the movie and how that's impacted you and Bekah and Doug, if you feel like this will generate a new generation of Doug and Bekahs all over the world now as well.
I think if you were to simmer it down to like one common denominator of a response to the film, it's been people talking about how emotional it is, a lot of tears coming out of screenings, a lot of people coming up to us and wanting to talk about why they cried and when they cried during the film. And I think that's been really surprising, because I promise you, this was not a conversation that was had in the edit room a lot of like, how do we tug on heartstrings, or when and why do we make people cry during the film? But I think it's been really interesting to see why people have had those reactions. I think from the beginning of storytelling, we've seen stories about human beings bonding with non-humans, and often those stories, I think, are some of the most emotional from books or filmmaking. And I think a lot of that is because in this story specifically, the scientific legacy of Spirit and Opportunity is huge, but it like strips the politics out of that conversation of climate change when it's two little rovers that are having these discoveries. But I think also people see themselves in the rovers in different ways. Like Bekah had kids while she was operating these rovers, or you see them. I've had a lot of older people come up to me and talk about watching Opportunity age and what's happening to her body and mind and relating to her in that way, which I never saw coming. So I think it's this function of, a little adorable creature that's the brave, intrepid explorer going around this planet alone, or with her twin sister on the other side, because we can't go there ourselves yet. And so we project all of our emotions onto her. And it's, for whatever reason, made a really emotional experience for people coming out of the film. And the film just came out on Amazon Prime like a few days ago. And that's, I would say, the overwhelming response as well, when I've been hearing from people, is how emotional the film was. Unexpectedly emotional.
You must have known that it was going to be emotional. Come on, we don't buy that for a second. Those rovers, they just melt your heart. You must have known.
But not tears, like I actually got told a lot at the beginning, at TheWrap in Toronto. I introduced the film as such a heartwarming, happy story, and I had, in both cities, I had teenage girls come up to me yelling at me afterwards, saying like, "Your movie's so sad. Why did you say it was going to be happy?" And I didn't realize that it was going to impact people on that deep of a level. I really didn't. I thought people were going to love the adventure and fall in love with the robots, but I didn't think it was going to be this like major dent to the heart.
For those of us on the project, I think the end of Opportunity came pretty quickly, and whilst we had 6 or so months of trying to recover the rover, it feels like a bit of a car crash. Like you're operating a rover, and suddenly you're done. It's over. We went from a really happy, healthy rover that had loads of power and could do anything we wanted to gone in 10 days because that dust storm was so savage and so quick. And these projects, it's like they get kicked out of the office, the servers get shut down, the charge codes get turned off pretty quick, and you don't really have time to process it. And Bekah was working Perseverance, I was working Curiosity, but there still feels like there's this hole. And this movie, to me, has filled that hole and put closure to the project in some respects. It always felt like we almost had unfinished business. I don't think we knew it, but I think this movie is that unfinished business that puts the emotional index onto the project and serves as, I think, the best thing that we can show to people to say, this is what this project was like. Not, here's the detailed engineering rationale for the design decisions made, or here's the spectroscopy and mineralogy and morphology of the rocks. This is what this project was like. Looks awesome, right? You should go do something similar. Like, that's what it feels like to me. It closes out the project, and it gives me something I can then take to other people and say, this is what it's like to work on a project where you're basically doing the first overland expedition of another planet.
Have people come up to you and said, I want to be a rover engineer now? I mean, have you seen it with a crowd, and what has that reaction been like for those of you who are actually on the ground still working on these things?
Yeah, I've had several encounters like that. In fact, oh my gosh, I haven't told you guys this, but somebody stopped me the other day. This is a side note, but quickly. Someone stopped me the other day and was like, "You look so familiar. How do I know you?" And I was like, I don't know. I get that a lot. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're in Goodnight Oppy." And that was just bizarre. But because it happened like 2 days ago. Okay, that's a side note though. One of my favorite responses from the film was a little girl who came up to me after she saw it and said, "Wow, I want to do this when I grow up. I want to be a Mars rover operator. And I want to do it because I saw how fun and sweet and kind the people are. And I want to be like that too when I grow up." Oh, that was just, because it's one thing if somebody wants to do it for like the technical reasons or whatever, but to want to do it for the human, to work with human beings like the people in the film and like be kind and respectful and geeky and nerdy and fun and whatever, like that is just a whole nother level of amazingness. So we got each other's contact information. I'm going to make sure I like mentor her throughout her career, but she was that was just nothing I'd ever heard before.
I got an email the day before yesterday from a principal of a primary school in England. He reached out and just said, "Hey, we're showing the movie at school next week. Any chance you could get on the Zoom call with our school kids?" And so that's what I'm doing at 6:30 on Friday morning. I'm going to be speaking to a primary school in England about our old rover.
Wow.
Awesome.
I mean, Ryan, how does that make you feel hearing these stories?
Oh, that's the best. I mean, we'd already started experiencing that a little bit at film festivals because we've been really trying to encourage parents to bring their children. And Amazon did a great job of reaching out to schools during the festival unveiling so I had already started talking to students, like even in TheWrap, I sat down with a group of middle schoolers to talk about the film. And we didn't edit this film for kids. Like, I think it's an adult film, but the best adult films don't dumb it down for kids. Like, kids are smart enough to understand an adult story. And so some of our best screenings have been for young people, and exactly the types of things that Doug and Bekah are saying. And I know Bekah's being humble, but I also heard, like, from Mark Mangini, our sound designer, the other day, he's like, "Oh, my friend's daughter like loved Bekah in the film and wanted to reach out to her, and I was all sheepish about doing it, and I did, and Bekah's going to be giving her a tour of JPL when Bekah lives in Austin now, but when she's back out in LA." So watching the kids get to connect to the human being characters in our stories, I think it's one of the most rewarding things. Like, I wanted to be an astronaut desperately when I was growing up, but I had no role models in that world, and it didn't happen for me. So if kids can find role models through this film, then I'm thrilled.
What about you, Jessica? How does all of this make you feel?
Well, I'm a mom, and I love the elements of the kids connecting with it, which my kids totally have. And I hear so much about it. But I also, like, during this, I want to not leave out the adults too, because I think that it brings a similar feeling in adults, and it's interesting in that. So I love those emails too, where people say, you know, what Ryan was talking about, having unexpected emotion and unexpected feelings that maybe you don't feel that much anymore. And when you're a kid, you're kind of there's more sense of wonder, and for whatever reason, we kind of lose that as we get older. Sometimes I think Doug and Bekah work in jobs that retain that to some extent, and so do Ryan and I. I feel like both of our jobs can kind of retain some of that, but I think in general, you lose that feeling of being inspired. And so to me, it's like something exceeding your expectations, and it's because of the hard work of all of these people coming together. Like, I love that feeling, and I love it when people, adults too, are experiencing that, which we don't get to see as often.
Yeah, I mean, the movie, it feels very hopeful in terms of like where sort of space exploration is going, and I think also it allows you to see what is going on, because it's not like we all sit down and watch, you know, the Apollo launches or something. Like, it's a little bit more opaque now, and I was wondering from everybody if that was part of the fun too, is just kind of like, you know, peeling back the curtain a little bit as to what space exploration looks like in 2022.
I was just going to say quickly that my dad made us watch, my dad, who's almost 80, made us watch both launch scenes over and over Thanksgiving, because those are like the parts that meant so much to him. Just loves a launch, right? Like, there's something about that that's so magical. And I was saying to him that, because Ryan, I mean, Bekah and Doug have been at those, but Ryan got to go to the launch of Perseverance. And I think, you know, having that experience, I feel like, Ryan, you can speak to it, was like transformative. It's magical. You're sending something millions of miles away. It's bananas. How do you do that?
Yeah, and I mean, the amount of older people that have come up to me and told me their story of watching the launch to the moon is I mean, it's like dozens and dozens of people who wanted to tell me their personal story. So there's something about space exploration that holds a place in people's heart. And I've also noticed in Q&As, like, this mission is old. Like, Opportunity and Spirit were antiquated, but people are watching this story for the first time, so they think that's how these people operate a rover on Mars. So in Q&As, when I'm talking about how Curiosity and Perseverance land, or how they're not solar powered anymore, or how Perseverance is a sample return mission, it like blows people's mind that things could come back from Mars in a couple decades. And so that to me is part of the fun of like the storytelling, of telling this like adorable story of this rickety old robot, and people think that's how it currently is, and then you get to tell them about all the technical and scientific advancements that have happened in those 20 years, and they are so excited, like kids especially.
I mean, you guys don't get to talk about this stuff all the time. I mean, I'm sure you're doing some real secret stuff. You probably got an alien underneath your desk right now. I mean, yeah, Doug's got one for sure. I mean, was that part of the fun too? Like telling the story and also updating everybody about how far you've come even since this amazing mission.
I'm really pleased that that the final beat is the Perseverance launch and Milo, because kind of good night opportunity, fade to black, roll credits would have been a little dramatic and a little like a car crash. Spirit and Opportunity, I think, represented like the maturation of roving on Mars as a technical discipline we are now capable of. We learned how to do Mars surface operations like this with Spirit and Opportunity, and those lessons are still being applied to how we operate Curiosity and Perseverance today. And it's nice to see the trials and tribulations of that captured, and newer and shinier and bigger, faster, stronger, better though they are. It's the same day-to-day challenge. It's the same, where are we? What do we want to do next? How are our resources looking? It's the same challenge even now, and it's nice to have like the personal side of that struggle every single day shared with the world like this.
Yeah, Bekah, please let me know.
Well, I just quickly, I think also something that's really interesting to see, the generation of people that came in during the building of Spirit and Opportunity and really Pathfinder and Sojourner, they're all at this age where they're retiring now. A lot of them have retired and some of them are retiring. And I've been getting a lot of emails. Doug was on this email too from, Steve Squires forwarded it to us, but from Wes Huntress, who used to be our NASA Associate Administrator. There are a lot of this generation that this film has given them like this parting gift from JPL or from NASA in general. It's such a good way to close off a chapter, and like there is so much potential and there's so much more left to discover. Each mission that goes to Mars has this very straightforward mission and goal. For Spirit and Opportunity, it was to find evidence of past water on Mars, but habitable water we can drink. And each mission is like that. And so there's still so much left to discover about Mars. There's still so much more to go. And so these and it takes a long time to do this, to discover, to find the answers that we're looking for. So all of these emails and things that I'm getting from people from the older generation, we call them the graybeards at JPL, but like people that are experts on these missions that do this, they've loved watching this film. And I think that says a lot for the quality of the film and all the story that's being told. It's a story that's never been told before in this way. So it's been really cool.
I think you guys are going to change the world, I think, through this documentary. The generations, we'll be blaming, living on Jupiter or something. It'll all be able to be traced back to Goodnight Oppy, I think. I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank everybody out there for joining us. Be sure to take advantage of our free trial to Wrap Pro and be the first to know about upcoming Wrap screenings and events. You can catch up on any past screenings you might have missed by visiting TheWrap.com. Just click on the screenings tab in the main nav bar. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And I love this movie with all my heart. So it's great to talk to everybody today.